Imagine the following scenario. The war in Ukraine keeps escalating. Russia is close to losing the war. External and internal pressure becomes unbearable for Moscow. As a last effort, they try to force Kiev to surrender. A tactical nuclear strike on the city of Lviv serves as a warning to both Ukraine and NATO. But it has the opposite effect. The West retaliates with a strike on Russian forces close to their border. The unthinkable happens. Both sides are launching their ICBMs. Millions die instantly. The world is burning. But what will happen next? Is it survivable or the end of civilization? Let's find out. And welcome to Dark New World. "10 to 15 minutes after explosion, radioactive fallout would fall off the sky in form of dusty particles. The wind would carry nuclear material into the air and contaminate wide areas of the surroundings. People that aren't shielded from radiation would get acute radiation sickness. Dust particles would make it life-threatening to be outside. These particles would also contaminate surface water and farmland. After 48 hours, depending on the fissile material that was used for the warhead, radiation would reduce significantly. But there would still be enough particles and dust and dirt everywhere to create radioactive hotspots that could be deadly. But what would cause a nuclear winter? Studies say if enough warheads would be detonated, dust particles would get pushed into the upper atmosphere. These particles could stay there for a long time, blocking most of the sunlight and pushing Earth into a small, man-made ice age. A study presented at the annual meeting of the American Geophysical Union in December 2006 found that even a small-scale, regional nuclear war could disrupt the global climate for a decade or more. In a regional nuclear conflict scenario where two opposing nations in the subtropics would each use 50 Hiroshima-sized nuclear weapons on major population centers, the researchers estimated as much as 5 million tons of soot would be released, which would produce a cooling of several degrees over large areas of North America and Eurasia, including most of the grain-growing regions. The cooling would last for years and could be catastrophic, disrupting agricultural production and food gathering in particular higher latitude countries. Additionally, nitrogen oxides would be produced by large amounts of nuclear detonations that would destroy the ozone layer. Ozone depletion would allow a much greater intensity of harmful ultraviolet radiation from the sun to reach the ground. A nuclear weapons exchange between India and Pakistan, using their current arsenals, could create a near-global ozone hole, triggering human health problems and causing environmental damage for at least a decade. In a nuclear war between the two countries, involving 50 Hiroshima-sized nuclear devices on each side, the massive urban fires would produce and loft as much as 5 million metric tons of soot about 80 kilometers into the stratosphere. The soot would absorb enough solar radiation to heat surrounding gases, increasing the breakdown of the stratospheric ozone layer protecting Earth from harmful ultraviolet radiation, with up to 70% ozone loss at northern higher latitudes. Everyone who's still alive after detonation and fallout would face freezing temperatures worldwide. There would be little to none agricultural output, because photosynthesis is not possible. Millions, and depending on the scale of the conflict, even billions would starve to death. Food reserves would last for 2 to 6 months, but the distribution of canned foods and supplies would not be secured. We are heavily dependent on a just-in-time delivery system. The pandemic showed that the system is very vulnerable to even smaller disruptions. A nuclear war would cut supply lines, shut off factories, destroy machinery and vehicles that are necessary to produce and distribute essential goods. The amount of disruptions would overwhelm every government on the planet. It's questionable if a country that gets directly attacked could survive the aftermath. But even countries that are not directly involved would face the danger of collapse. Especially food and energy import-dependent countries would get cut off from their lifeline. To secure the much-needed resources, nations would wage war to secure their survival. Diplomatic efforts would be meaningless. Peace is not an option when your population is starving. It would be everyone for themselves, and the power balance would shift dramatically. Most places on Earth would see the rise of internal conflict, looting, and extreme factions on the rise. There is no hope for a quick de-escalation due to the long-term effects of nuclear winter. Humanity would be trapped in the situation until the atmosphere would allow agriculture again. In this 10-year-long process, billions would die, marking the 21st century as the biggest setback for humanity. On an individual level, there is not much that one can do. Urban centers and cities would turn into meat grinders, and rural areas would see conflict due to the influx of refugees. The air we breathe would be toxic, and the medical standard we have today to treat sickness would be non-existent. Like in the past, a minor injury could cause death. The climate would be freezing cold. The world would see a mass exodus of people trying to reach the equator. And if the sun is shining through clouds and ash, it would be harmful and deadly. Nuclear dearmament is our only hope. A nuclear exchange 40 years ago would be way more devastating than it is today, because the amount of nuclear weapons is decreasing for years. But after the cancellation of the INF Treaty by the US, and then later Russia, we could be on a path of nuclear rearmament. The consequences of nuclear war would be pretty grim. But we know this threat for almost 70 years now. And we're still here. That's why it's important to work towards peace, no matter how bad the world looks today. Unfortunately, the war in Ukraine marks a shift of strategy from the Russian perspective. While it was used as a strategic deterrent in the past, the war in Ukraine shifted the focus of Russia's nuclear forces into a more offensive, aggressive position. Now, the nuclear arsenal is used to threat and obtain goals. Intimidation is something different than a defensive deterrent. But how long is a threat useful if you never execute what you're promising to do? It could start with a smaller nuclear device, but once it's used, things can escalate quickly. The tensions in the world were never high in the last 80 years. Everything we achieved as a species would be wiped out. All the progress of the last 10,000 years would be gone. And not only science and industry, but social fabric, culture, and art, as much as our collective experiences and skills. There is only one Earth, one place we can call home. Okay, full stop. This is a new channel, and I'm glad you found this place. Please subscribe and like the video. For a small channel like mine, this counts a lot. My name is Dennis. Thank you for watching and goodbye.